Bienvenidos, sí, bienvenidos y bienvenidas a todos. Gracias por estar presentes hoy con nosotros o cuando sea que nos estén mirando, si nos están mirando on demand, a este primer coloquio que organizamos en la red denominada REDINPLA, Red de Investigadores en y de Plataformas. Mi nombre es Agustina Lassi y voy a cambiar a inglés ahora para que nuestro invitado nos comprenda, pero recuerden que pueden activar el closed caption de YouTube para seguir mejor lo que vamos diciendo. We would like to welcome everyone to our first official activity as a researcher network, which we decided to call Vivir e investigar en tiempos de mediatización profunda, living and researching in times of deep mediatization. This activity will be hosted by me, Agustina Lassi, and Santiago Videla. So thanking both guests, and with no further ado, I hand the steering wheel to Santiago.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all for agreeing to being here. Thank you very much, Professor Hepp. Thank you very much, José Luis Fernández. Gracias, José Luis, por conectarte. Muito obrigado pelos colegas do Brasil. Esse processo de integração que estamos realizando é muito importante. Já está começando a dar frutos com este evento. Gracias a todos los colegas de América Latina y Caribe por sumarse a esta propuesta de red de trabajo. The event was conceived from the Platform Researchers Network, a rede de pesquisadores em plataformas, la red de investigadores en plataformas, REDINPLA, as a part of a project in which more researchers scattered in Latin America can connect to understand the specificity of particular type of mediatization, which is one that's solved in media platforms. Our goal is not to generate an institutional bureaucracy to interconnect universities, but an effective network of research and knowledge between peers. From there, we get in touch with recognized and long-standing researchers, our referents, to ask them to talk about these issues, learn a little more from them. The first one I'm going to give the word is Professor José Luis Fernández. To clarify, I'm not going to dwell on the explanation of the field of mediatization. I will check something first. Here, okay. Because the text from Escolari, Fernández, and Rodríguez Amat already covers it. So that monograph, Mediatization, North and South Epistemological and Empirical Perspective, from Sweden and Brazil, by Bonin Ferreira e otros, 2024, from 2024. As both texts explain, we are faced with a fragmentary field on diverse theoretical influences. Even the work of Couldry and Hepp describes the difference between European studies. So today the key is not to focus in the differences. Today the idea is to look at the coincidences that make possible for us to create and share knowledge in a productive way. In recent years, Fernandez's production has been dedicated to conceptualizing the lives of media phenomena and to offering us in a methodological mechanics, una mecánica metodológica, su último trabajo, su libro del 2021, perdón, from 2021, a tool for analysis that covers more than 30 years of academic and market research. I point this out because this is what enlightens the José Luis Fernández point of view, at least from my perspective. Then in 2024, he offers us, in the Four Invisible Revolutions, Las Cuatro Revoluciones Invisibles, su último libro, his latest book, a perspective to understand the audiences on the internet and digital phenomena from the need to reconstruct the figure of the audionautes, that is, to understand that type of disparate audience which is crossed by different stimuli at different levels. Try to think in a urban passerby who walks around the street and then he listens music from a store and then he listens some radio show from the cab and then he hears another radio show in his house and then he hears another fragment of another type of genre of a radio show that he is habitué, but meanwhile he's cooking, but at the end of the day he can figure out what's going on in his life, what's going on in his social environment, but not in a delusional way. So he can articulate all these dispersed fragments in a logical way. And that skill is which, in José Luis Fernández's perspective, the skill that users of platforms need to live in platforms. So Professor Hepp, whom we admire and follow his work, will speak later. I won't be saying anything about his curricula or his production. I prefer to focus The first one is that he proposes a view of mediatization that doesn't stop only at the technological aspect. His focus is on the sophistication of the relationship system established between media and users, and between users, consumers, audiences. In other words, this key aspect for him is that this mediatization allows us to understand how the social system, how the social relations are altered, and not simply how technology impacts us or how much business can be done with this technology. And secondly, he takes up from Bloomer this idea that is beautiful to understand concepts such as deep mediatization or living in platforms, vivir en plataformas de José Luis Fernández, or even the use of the notion of style, estilo, como lo usa José Luis, which is the idea of sensitizing concept, a concept that, I quote Bloomer, gives the user a general sense of reference and guidance in approaching empirical instances. Bloomer is a non-well-known sociologist in America Latina. He's not the most important bibliography in our sociological careers, but he published in the middle 50s this idea that in the social sciences, there is only a little or a few or maybe nothing terminological heritage that we have working in a finished and close way, and in which all we agree on that what it means. And this shouldn't be an obstacle when it comes to producing knowledge, but rather we should allow ourselves to use concepts that are previously sensitized. That is to say, concepts that are descriptive of a phenomena that have gray edges, that have unfinished edges, but which in the meantime allows us to agree and move forward and generate knowledge. And the concept as deep mediatization has this power. And all the Professor Hepp's work, both in terms of mediatization specifically, and in the latest work that he's producing, which is very interesting, on artificial intelligence platforms, that idea is permanently behind him, and this is something that makes it easy to engage with his production, to understand his production, and even better, to use his production as a tool for understanding. So, Agustina Lassi, again, thank you both for agreeing to be here with us. And Agustina Lassi, colleague from University of La Matanza and founding member of REDINPLA, will be presenting you both so we can start this conversation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Santiago. Thank you both for being here. It's a pleasure for me to be presenting these huge figures in our field. So I'm going to start with José Luis. José Luis Fernández is a professor emeritus at University of Buenos Aires. Since 1995, he has directed UBASIT research projects on mediatization and lives of the sonorous things. He was a full professor of semiotics of mediatizations until 2021. And since then, he has published several books on the study of mediatizations in media platforms. Welcome, both of you, and everyone who's listening to us now. And we are very glad to hear you, José Luis.
Many thanks to the network, to Santiago, Agustina for the organization, for Professor Hepp to accept this meeting. I try to find my presentation. Are you viewing the presentation?
Nope.
Oh. Ya lo hacemos. Ya lo resolvemos. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. It's moving? No, not it's moving. I'm sorry. I know. Is moving the presentation?
Sí.
Yes.
Yes. And so, well, I begin with a small background. My objective is not introduce us in our big discussion, if not to try to build new spaces to work together in our common subjects. Deep Mediatisation is one of the macro models that have been helping us to organize the relationship between our objects of study and their context of development. In our framework, it has been coexisting with others such as hypermediatization or post-broadcasting. We are working, interacting among at least of three models. There must be a path of complementary between research trajectories, in addition to the inevitable discussion about models. The objective is working, avoiding the discussion, the macro discussion. I think that meso-level can facilitate these interdisciplinary interactions. We have only a small time to review of these topics, so we can be quick and clear. I have been reading Professor Hepp's work and with his teamwork, and the other professor of another North Europe studies on mediatization. The deep mediatization notion is very complex and is product to teamwork in a long time working. It is impossible to me resume all the possibilities. I will focus on figuration, refiguration topic and humans machine interactions with the interface on data and AI studies. I think that it's another bridge in North Europe and Latin America approaches of research. What easy answer. Is meso any level that we can build or rebuild between a micro level and a macro level? But outside jokes, micro, meso, and macro are operational categories to organize the relationship of our research practices with the socio-cultural context inside we work and in front of we present our results. The micro. We understand that micro are materialities to be analyzed on mediatization. No? Materialities are constituted by three series: technical devices, the generic stylistic crossroad, and the proposal of use and their articulations. Micro complexity can only be controlled by the fulfilling of objective. We think that into the micro is when we find and need to understand the complexity of the mediatizations. In the other stream of extension, we find the macro. The macro is the common place of the importance of any research. The greater the extension of a categoria is implied is that less precise it is to contain the phenomenon it describes. In a macro conclusion intervention, the effort must be placed on not dissolving the micro. The meso is the interface or the bridge level between research objectives and socio-cultural contexts. Research objectives always must include the contribution from the micro to the meso, for us, obviously. If relationships with the macro are proposed at the beginning, they must be supported by solid secondary information, not by accepted plausibility. This is controversial. I think that the new information, the new knowledge, by definition, is added from the micro to the macro. But when we present projects or conclusions about our research, it's plausible to begin from the macro because the society is worried about the macro problems. You know, it's this tension in between investigation and presentation is very important to be understood. I'm sorry. The book about demediatization, the Professor Hepp has 7 chapters. The high complexity. The reading exceeds my possibilities of single glance. From this brief summary, I will focus on the phenomena linked to figuration, refiguration, discursivities, recursivities. I think that is main conflict area to think and to discuss and to comment. From these 7 chapters, I bring these paragraphs. Questions about it. How to grasp figuration, the action, the verb to grasp, I love it, because we use in general terms to capture, but to grasp introduce the indetermination of our work. When we, as we see now, introduce the notion of capture, we need to explain our methodologies, more than methodology, techniques to research. Question. To understand figuration and discursivity, we start outside or inside mediatizations? We need to start from their surfaces or directly from the depths. Data collection are the same that construction and capture data. This is for me a main problem in this time to research. It's the research experiences, okay? How to preserve the complexity of mediatization in the quality analysis. Sociosemiotic contribution. A small contribution, nothing is terrible. First of all, we play to review the level of the phenomenon. Then we'll review tensions between discursivity, recursivity, and review the relationship, data capture, and analysis. What if deep mediatization were a meso level? Is too low the importance of the deep mediatization? In general terms, if we take deep mediatization as macro concept, as macro phenomena, inevitable figuration, refiguration, recursivity, and human-machine interaction are depending on our definition of the mediatization. The macro concept generates limitations, in my opinion, in the description of figuration and recursivity phenomena. In change, if I take demediatization as a meso approach, I can study figuration, refiguration, and human-machine interaction recursivity and understand demediatization from the knowledge that we are building from figuration, refiguration as socio-semiotics terms, and human-machine interaction and recursivity as computational or data analysis terms. So I think that demediatization in this considering in this level is most possible that all of us understand the real importance of the demediatization concept. Figuration is used in different forms by the North European researchers on mediatization, following a large tradition sociological, microsociological tradition related with cultural studies. In the book of Professor Hepp, figuration is understood as tool transgressing the distinction between the levels of micro, meso, and macro. This is figuration is a macro and transversal process. As concept that can be applied to relationships as well as larger entities, societies as a whole. This paragraph shows the transversality focus or approach on figuration. Figurations are like an interface between individual performance and different frames of relevance. This is following an idea de Norbert Elias that social interaction is based of chains of interdependence. So in this approach, figuration is a sociological machine of interaction. In other fieldwork, figures and figuration are related like process of meaning construction, figuration, and emergencies of this process. We, following Eliseo Verón, we find figures, products, and we build process of sense, or production of sense. Figuration would be in this approach like a basic process of construction of meaning. Figure is a result on the surface. Figuration is a process of construction. The emerging of figure allows us to propose construction of context, organization, and sender, receiver, of user. As process of construction of meaning, figuration is a typical enunciative process to order the exchange discursive systems of interchange discourses. Figure propose differentiated sense of interaction. With figuration, it's not enough to understand a process of mediatization or mediatization process. But without figuration, it's not possible to understand deep mediatization. It's a point to discuss. So, can there be discursivity without figuration? How can we understand recursivity as a computational phenomenon without media discursivity? Trying to understand mediatization, of course. Always social individual interfaces, always mediatization play intention, social and individual. My book about mediatic lives, its subtitle is between the massive and the individuals. No, it's a key point to understand mediatization in our age. This position, the sociocultural and the sociosemiotic approach, are opposites or could be complementaries. Of course, I think and I work if they were complementary, but it's a point of discussion. Data collection, Professor Hepp, in general terms, and not Europe approaches, the action accepted is data collection. So this implied should mean that for one hand there are data, and in other hand we cultural researchers or semiotic researchers we will make analysis with that data, or in fact we can participate the process of data capture. I think that data capture is a very, very important phenomenon of our age and the future. I'm late, ¿no?
Sí, podría saltar por ahí un par de slides porque estamos en tiempo.
Sí, well, I don't know discuss about phases of data research. I will go to this. Are you viewing this figuration and discursivity chart?
No, dejaste de compartir.
Bueno, I'm sorry, I'm sorry for the delay too. Okay, I'm here. No puedo compartir. Okay. This chart takes advance of a picture from the Deep Mediatisation book, when Professor Hepp take advantage of these different figures and pictures to represent myths on mediatization. It's very, very nice, that chapter. My question is, can any representation of the myths of mediatization be doing without this type of text? My answer is not. We need this type of picture to be used in our analysis. Then I present a chart about figuration operation that we use to analyze. But the important is to understand that these four pictures have construction operation, referencing operation, and insertion operation. Well, it's not the same that figures are in an academic test that in a book, in commercial publication. So, my proposal is incorporate semiotics analysis to figuration and demediatization analysis. A ver si puedo mostrar los...
Dejaste de compartir.
Sí, pero porque estaba en una posición, no quiero compartir. To end the presentations. If deep mediatization is considered as meso instead of macro, it does not seem to lose importance. Sociosemiotics, as a weakness, requires microinformation to take advantage of the power of its methodologies. Discursivity plus figuration seems to be a good field of interaction in interdisciplinary research tables. The grid precoding technique is suitable as an interface or bridge between discursive materialities and their capture to be loaded into data analysis apps and to establish relationship between discursivity and recursivity. There we have a possibility of maintaining media complexity in the passage from quali to quanti approaches. No one will be able to stop the research process underway based on the software of programmers and engineers, now expanded with AI generative. But perhaps we can introduce sophistication micro-meso approaches into the interdisciplinary process. I'm sorry for the extension. Many thanks for your attention, and we follow the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, José Luis. We will now hear Andreas Hepp. He's a professor of media and communication, head of the ZeMKI Center for Media, Communications, and Information Research at the University of Bremen, Germany. He is also spokesperson of the research unit 5656, I guess I'm saying it well, Communicative AI, the automation of societal communication. His research and teaching focuses on how media change and how transformations in the way we communicate are interrelated with refigurations within culture and society. To adequately define this scenario, he chooses the term deep mediatization. We hear you now, Andreas. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so far. I try to start my screen sharing. Hopefully it will work. Okay, can you see my screen? Can you see my screen? Okay, good. So it worked. Well, thanks a lot for having the opportunity to speak here. Of course, I could know your presentation, José, which is the reason why I cannot directly refer to it. So my slides had more, let's say, general approach or perspective. Nevertheless, in what I'm talking or what I'm saying, I try to refer back to some of your arguments. So what I brought with me is basically an argument for broadening the scope of mediatization research, referring to three particular kinds of theses. The thesis one is that mediatization and datafication are not opposites. At least this is something which you can find in a German or European discussion. Datafication and also the automation of communication are an inherent trend of deep mediatization. The second thesis I want to argue for is that communicative AI is a phenomenon of societal communication and therefore also of society's mediatization, which has some consequences on how we think about it in the relation between mediatization research and research in the field of human and machine communication. And the third thesis I have is that we should expand the existing mediatization research of consequence with the mediatization research of emergence. So many of these three theses crucially are built on the arguments I developed within the book of Deep Mediatization, but I think there are this or that point where they go beyond it. I hope I can make this understandable in the frame of time I have. So let's start with the thesis one. Mediatization and datafication are not opposites. Datafication and the automation of communication are an inherent trend of deep mediatization. So to understand that thesis, I think it's needed to refer back to a discussion we have somehow in Europe. I brought with me here one quote from a paper or from an article or chapter within the book Contemporary Challenges in Mediatization Research. This chapter was written by Anna Count, and within that chapter, she argues as follows. It is exactly the move away from mediatization that I see as its biggest challenge. In what follows, I will outline first the process of disappearance and second, discuss some potential reasons for the coming end of mediatization research. One of the reasons for this disappearance I situate in the changed notion and character of media that is fundamental to the turn towards datafication. To try to explain the argument Anna Count develops within this chapter, some additional sentences beyond that quote. So more or less what Anna Count argues in that chapter is that with most recent digital media, digital infrastructure, the main issue about researching them is reflecting on how data are produced by these media and what kind of impact this production of data might have on society. And exactly this is something she links with the term datafication, with mediatization, she links much more questions of mediation. So that is of sense making. And I think at this point, I see at least one argument or one relation back to your presentation, José. So I would go with you and argue, well, from my point of view, this argument of unaccount falls short. And the point I would like to make is not that we shouldn't address questions of datafication, but as my thesis go, they are an inherently part of mediatization. So what do I understand, or what do we understand by mediatization? Just to explain it in one very, very basic slide. From our point of view, mediatization means something different than mediation. So mediatization is a concept for critically analyzing the long-term interrelationship between the change of media and communication on the one hand and culture and society on the other hand. Therefore, in contrast to mediation, mediatization does not just mean sense-making. Mediatization is a term to capture this interrelation from a perspective of how it changed over the time. We can argue that there are quantitative aspects of mediatization. So this is the social, spatial, and temporal span of technical communication media. But there are also, and this is where it becomes interesting or more interesting, qualitative aspects, what was called molding forces of the media, or how media shape, how media institutionalize, materialize processes of communication, and therefore also sense making. So starting from this basic understanding of mediatization, deep mediatization means more an advanced stage of mediatization in which the foundations of our social world are constitutively interwoven with digital media and their infrastructures. The point here is really that these digital media and infrastructures are, well, without that, the society as we know it today couldn't be constituted. Just to give you one example, which hopefully explains this well, this is the financial market as we have it nowadays. So financial market, financial trade as we know it today wouldn't work in that way without digital media and infrastructures. It just would not exist in that way. Many forms of trading just would stop. And this is really the point where constitution or being constitutively comes in. And this is exactly the point where we see, or we would argue, that deep mediatization is an advanced stage of mediatization. We can relate this to various trends of the transformation of our media environment. So for example, the trend of an increasing differentiation of media. We are living in times where we are confronted with more and more media instead, as it was the original imagination of the 70s, 80s, 90s, that a computer would end in something like a super medium integrating everything. However, the point is that this variety of different media nowadays are highly interconnected through the infrastructures of the internet. Through mobile communication, they are omnipresent, and we are also confronted with an increasing path of innovation. So I wouldn't like to discuss these four trends here more deeply, but I would like to highlight two other things. In this definition of deep mediatization, datafication was from the beginning understood as one of the trends of deep mediatization, because in the moment of time, when digital media, or when media become digital, they are always, besides a mean for mediation of communication, a mean for production of data. This means datafication is par definition part of deep mediatization. And also the same can be said for the processes of automation of communication we are confronted with nowadays. So they are more or less, as a further trend, a kind of outcome of the increasing datafication. Ideas to automate communication are old. However, we could not realize these ideas of automation of communication because, for example, language models didn't have the data corpus they could be trained on. With this increasing datafication, with the ability to get access to a huge amount of data which was collected by the infrastructure of internet, we could develop more, or the trend of an increasing automation of communication could increase. So therefore, the point I would like to make is that also datafication and automation should be understood as one of the trends of deep mediatization, and therefore they are also characteristic for the media manifold we are confronted with in our today's media environment. The point here, and this is where I am with the term of figuration, refiguration, the point here, the question here is, what changes with deep mediatization? For me, the argument with taking a figurational approach is to say we don't have one consequence of these trends of deep mediatization. It very much depends on the particular context, or as we would argue, using that term I know about Elias, it very much depends on the particular figurations, how or what possible consequences of deep mediatization are. And being more systematic at this point, we could argue that we have at least three more general moments of refiguration by deep mediatization. First of all, we have, through deep mediatization, a higher level of interrelations. So I already argued about the infrastructure of the internet and how this infrastructure of the internet goes across a diversity of different figurations. And by this, for example, data is produced across these different figurations. Figurations of families, of communities, of organizations, and so on. But also when it comes to the sense making, we are confronted with processes or with new interrelations. And this is where I also would see these questions of the myth of deep mediatization. We have an emergence of new figurations, for example, figurations which build around digital platforms. You can think about Airbnb and others, which just build new figurations of humans who use these platforms, figurations which would not be existent otherwise. And finally, we have the transformation of existing figurations. Just to give you another example, of course, the newsroom changes when digital media become part of, and new kinds of digital technologies become part of producing the news. This brings me to my second thesis, and this is communicative AI as a phenomenon of societal communication and therefore of society's mediatization. So this thesis has a background in the public discussion about communicative AI or generative AI. There's very often framed as a tool which, or as a new kind of entity which interacts with one single human, one single person. So it's very much discussed also in the public in this framework of human-machine interaction. With this thesis, I would like to argue against such a, from my point of view, too narrow view. But before I go deeper into this argument or in the thesis, give me the chance to define what we understand as communicative AI. This is a quite broad understanding, an understanding which includes recent forms of generative AI, but also all the forms of AI built for communication, like, for example, Weizenbaum's ELIZA. There are three points alongside which we define communicative AI. So first of all, communicative AI is based on various forms of automation whose purpose is communication. Therefore, the crucial point from our perspective is communication and not, for example, intelligence. If the systems are intelligent or considered as intelligent or not, well, this is a question of cognitive construction. Second, these technologies are embedded within digital infrastructure. So the point is that all these technologies wouldn't exist if they wouldn't be part of larger digital infrastructures. I think this is most evident, for example, for systems which are based on large language models. Without the infrastructure of the internet, it would not be possible to collect all the learning data to make large language models work. Therefore, the last point is these technologies are entangled with human practices. Even when it comes to the production of data for large language models, it is human practices based on which this data is produced. Again, we would also understand such a concept as a sensitizing concept. So it sensitizes us for two things. First, for the breadth of the phenomenon. So communicative AI, this can be very different things like artificial companions, chatbots, news bots, social bots, work bots, and more diverse other systems. But the second point it should sensitize us for is the depth of the phenomenon. And this is exactly what I want to highlight here, that the automation of communication is not simply about human-machine interaction, but about the transformation of societal communication as a whole when automated systems become part of it. To substantiate this, well, we can already refer to the emergence of most recent communicative AI, like, for example, ChatGPT or GPT-3 and GPT-4. Just to show you what I mean, on this slide, you can see a Google Trends analysis, which represent the global searches for the terms OpenAI, ChatGPT, and AI. What you can see here is that publicly spoken, there was really no interest in OpenAI and GPT before the 27th of November 22. This is exactly the moment when the campaign of OpenAI started and the hype around ChatGPT started. The point I want to make here is that all our imaginations, which we might have in relation to these technologies, have a lot to do how this hype was made, how it was presented in the media, and what kind of discourse started around this. Barres and Katzenbach, a colleague at ZeMKI, called this talking into being. So the public talk about the possibilities of these AI systems is far beyond what these technologies can do at this moment of time. Therefore, if you understand cognitive AI as a phenomenon of societal communication, it means to highlight that we can not adequately understand the emergence of communicative AI as well as its role in the construction of reality if we do not see it as part of this overall communication within society. And the core arguments here are that already something like the attribution of intelligence or agency to systems of automated communication is supported by societal discourse. So this is part of the communicative construction of such systems across society. The public, but also science, are participating in the talking of communicative AI into being, and the change of actions in automated communication go far beyond the conversational encounters. So if we limit our focus on systems of communicative AI by just focusing on the human-machine interaction, we lose a lot of the dimensions, a lot of the changes we are confronted with. However, nevertheless, I would argue that mediatization research would benefit a lot linking much deeper to human and machine communication research. And the reason for this is that human-machine communication as a field goes far beyond reflecting systems like cognitive AI just, or it is an approach which does not reflect on systems of communicative AI in the framework of human-machine interaction. The links I would like to argue for, or links I would see between mediatization research and human-machine communication, is that a combination of the long-term perspective of mediatization research with a more in-depth analysis of human-machine communication would be a benefit for addressing this emerging field of research. When it comes to the sensitizing character, mediatization research is very strong in developing such sensitizing concepts. What we can get from human-machine communication are very definitive concepts for investigating, for example, communicative AI. And last but not least, there's a relationship between the domain specificity, which is often highlighted in mediatization research. So the argument that mediatization differs from one domain to another, from one figuration to another, and the actor relatedness in human-machine communication research. So bringing both together would be a further kind of perspective. Let me come to my third thesis in the last 5 minutes I have. And the thesis is we should expand the existing mediatization research of consequence within mediatization research of emergence. So what do I mean with mediatization research of consequence? Well, not only within mediatization research, but within media and communications in general, we have a very strong tradition thinking in consequences, in impact, in effect, and so on. And very often our research is framed by large-scale ideas. For example, looking back at the beginning of so-called social media, and it is not an accident that this pic you can see has a lot of pixels. Well, this somehow represent the time when it was. In the beginning, we really had a collective narrative that all the social media would be a help for democratizing processes, for bringing people together, for revolution, or things like that. Well, this was the core idea. If we now look at the present discussion, another kind of narrative dominates, and this is the narrative which puts much more emphasis on problems related to social media. So the argument there is that social media are bad for public discourse, they are bad for health, they are not good, or they are supporting hate speech, and so on and so on. The point I would like to make is, referring to these two narratives, is that this is inherently a thinking consequences and impact. So the look which dominates, the perspective which dominates, is focusing on questions of media or mediatization in a framework of what consequence do emerging or do new media have. In contrast to this, I would like to argue that if we want to understand the deep mediatization of society, we must not only ask about the consequence of the spread of digital media and their infrastructures, but we must also focus much more strongly on their emergence. The example we are addressing this research are pioneer communities. So groups of people which for a very, very long time imagine the future of digital media, of a digital world, and by this have a deep impact, a highly important role in the way of how digital media and technologies are developed and constructed. I cannot go deep into the details of our research on pioneer communities, but I want to highlight one thing, taking one example of such a pioneer community, the hackers, which are, beside others, also active in Latin America. So in Buenos Aires, they have one of the international most active groups. If we focus on these hackers, which imagined in the beginning data journalism which is deeply entangled with digital media, if we look at the newsletters of hackers, we can realize something very interesting when it comes to communicative AI. So far beyond the hype which we now have with ChatGPT, OpenAI, and generative AI on the possibilities AI might have for journalism, we already had, across or by the help of this newsletter, a discourse that the future of journalism would be exactly within such technologies. In the beginning, it was more kind of discursive framing, saying, well, these emerging technologies is something we should address, we should reflect on it. They were presented as an emerging trend. And then in the discourse, deepened by examples. Very often the examples not coming from the core of journalism, because there these technologies were not in use at this moment of time. So they were more coming from arts and other fields. However, again and again and again, developing an imagination that communicative AI as a technology or means as a technology, the future for journalism at an intersection of writing and programming. So the point I want to make here is, if you only focus on media technologies, on digital media in the moment of time when they begin to spread within society, we are not able to address, or we are not able to reflect that the basic frameworks of how these technologies might be a use of society or for society are developed much earlier, for example, as part or within so-called pioneer communities. A mediatization research of emergence would mean exactly, or would mean for me exactly this: to reflect on digital media, or so-called new media, in the moment of the constitution, and exactly understanding already this as part of the transformation of society. It means that we should reflect on the fields of research, so much more address different contexts of emergence within our empirical research, but also discourses on emerging media. But we also should think about the methods we are using for our research. So just to highlight one thing, scenario research. I don't believe that scenario research is a tool by which we would be able to predict the future. However, the interesting thing from my perspective is that scenario research is used within business, for example, as a tool for futuring. So, which means for developing particular kinds of or ideas of the future, which are then pushed forwards. And I would argue here that we should start to experiment also with that kind of methods, not in this case because they are a useful tool to predict the future, but to get an understanding what's going on in the field and how particular constructions, imaginations of the future are pushed forward. This is somehow or part of the research we are doing, or we started or will start to do in our research unit on communicative AI and the automation of societal communication. So the empirical work within this research unit will start in January 1st, so quite soon, in 2 weeks' time. We already have hired the researchers in the different projects and are very much looking forward to starting with our research. Thanks a lot so far.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor
I hope
Hepp.
I could somehow link to the arguments which were given before, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yes, of course. That's what we're waiting for as well. It was a wonderful presentation from both of you. Thank you very much. I will now give the word to Marieli Rivera, one of our researchers in this network that has a few questions for both of you. And then we can, after those answers, we can let you to the discussion, let both of you to the discussion. Marieli, all yours.
Yes, thank you, Agustina, and thank you, professors, for your time and wonderful explanations. The first is for José Luis. José Luis, how important is to educate these topics as a communication major on higher education universities? This is the question for José Luis and for Andreas. My question is, what implications those deep mediatization have for the music industry?
Well, I think that the micro level methodologies they will be central to understand the communication processes. I agree with the tendency described by Andreas, by Professor Hepp, but always my question is, if I understand and teach about artificial intelligence, the comprehension of discursive phenomena is previous or is posterior to the algorithms techniques. And I think that I risk to show me as conservative professor, but I still think that the micro approach is absolutely complementary with the Professor Hepp description about the future, the present and the future.
Thank you.
Okay, so did I get you right? Your question was about teaching and music industries.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I think, how does it relate to teaching? I can only tell about our practice. So for us at ZeMKI Bremen, researching deep mediatization has a very long tradition, which was the reason why we, from the beginning, did develop quite broad MA programs. So not MA programs which were addressed which addressed a particular field, like, for example, journalism. But our understanding was to teach students or give students a broader scope on the transformation of society. The first program we started with was an MA program on media, culture, and globalization. And again, there was the point to say, well, the whole culture changes with mediatization. The second program we started with was digital media and society. So this is, if you want to take it like that, deeper into the argument of deep mediatization, to say it's the whole society which transforms when digital media and infrastructures become crucial or constitutive for such societies. And most recently, we started an MA program called Media and Public Engagement, which has the same argument. When it comes to public engagement, it might be within journalism, but it can be also via consulting, or it might be in NGOs or whatever. So it's, for us, it's really this broader scope we have. I would say we have been successful with that. So the students learned a lot. The students, got good positions, and even also within traditional media institutions. So, for example, public broadcasting, to give you one example for that. So I think in the field there's a high acceptance for this broader approach. To your second question, when it comes to the music industry, so I'm not an expert of music industries. What I'm saying is more from outside, but of taking or having this look from the outside, I would say definitively music industries is highly transformed by deep mediatization. So all music products are nowadays, as it is called, cross-platform. The way how marketing goes must reflect this, but also the economic pressure many artists have is related to that. I don't know how the situation is in Latin America, but in Europe, for example, the situation is in the meantime that a lot of artists increased again, giving concerts, playing live on stage, because the digital revenues are quite low. And so we have a far-reaching transformation of music industries, which relates back to what we call deep mediatization. This said, I'm not an expert in music industries. I think a colleague who is doing terrific stuff on this topic is David Hesmondhalf at Leeds University. He has a large project on that, and if you're interested in this, I think his writings might be interesting.
Thank you.
We have so much to discuss, to talk about. I have so many questions. We all have so many questions, but now I'm going to give the voice to Andrea Angulo, another researcher from our network that has a question for you both.
Good afternoon for everybody, and thank you for José Luis and Andreas for your speak. And I would like to start with a question for José Luis Fernández, and I would like to know how do we can use sociosemiotics models for studying these social imaginaries that come by using AI. For example, my students are using AI for imaginary futures and another kind of scenarios. And I would like to know how sociosemiotics can help us to study how they perceive these images produced by the AI systems. And then for Andreas Hepp, I would like to ask how communicative AI is mediatizating our imaginaries about the future. I mean, there are also these scenarios that the AI creates that reveals some social constructions about the future, and I would like to know how can we analyze that, yeah, from the user's perspective, especially.
I think that why fascinated ChatGPT? My answer is because first time in that software represent copy stylistic patterns. First time, if you ask ChatGPT about academic questions, ChatGPT make answers in academic styles with losses, but sounds academic style. We can understand this aspect. I have a model where genres and styles are present. if I have not a model with a sophistication about discursiveness, I can understand why like people ChatGPT. The same is when I said micro research, I don't say only sociosemiotics research. I include ethnographic research and relating both interaction in symbolist. Interaccionismo simbolico, sì. Symbolic interactionism, no? From microsociology. For me, it's a key point to understand the interchange in action or in discursive, mediatic or face-to-face. I discussed a long time ago the idea of from Lemanovich, the hero about these things, but they say that software is the message. Yeah, I think that is a simplification of Marshall McLuhan approach. I think that software is a technical device. Admit or close possibilities, but you never make an interchange, commercial interchange, to simplify, only with the software. You need knowledge about prices, terms of interchange. You need to know, as Professor Hepp said, very complex knowledge about society or sociocultural phenomena. So I think that to understand, to learn about artificial intelligence, you need at least two levels very different epistemological levels to learn. Sociocultural disciplines and technological disciplines. I think that without one of them, you can't understand the present of the mediatization. I think that in this point, I agree with Professor Hepp. I answered. Yes, no?
Okay, good. Well, thanks a lot. I tried to give you a threefold answer to your question. So the first 2 points I want to make do not exactly relate to your question on the imaginaries of the future, but I think they are needed to understand what I want to say in the end. So the first thing, and this is where I can refer back to what José Luis said, is really to understand what these technological systems are doing. So what they are giving to us is what we might call a communicative feedback, which is something different than practice, I would say. So you enter something and you get an individual output from the system, which is, at least if we talk about ChatGPT and comparable systems, which are based on large language models, which is more or less the information which we have collected through all or various digital traces we as a collectivity have left by our online practices. So this is the first point. You get a communicative effect, a feedback. The second point I want to make is that this cognitive feedback has something we might call wow effect. And this is nothing new. Yeah? If you look back at Weizenbaum's ELIZA, which is more than half a century ago, already there it was the wow effect. I'm typing something into a system and I'm getting a question back. This was for the people, wow, a system starts to communicate with you. And this is, I think, for us as humans, which are so much centered on communication in our life, this is a central point. And these two things, I think this is what we just have firsthand to see as a crucial aspect of what we might call communicative AI. So when it now comes to imaginaries of the future, this is something which very much relates to the discourse we have in public around these systems. So it's discourse about their super intelligence or discourse about their risks. So they would be a possible risk for society, like, for example, climate change. I think if we talk about such discourses around communicative AI, we should be very cautious. And this has the reason that they are exactly part of what we might call talking into being, or that hype around communicative AI, which is part of the social process of constructing the chances that these systems might develop to a higher level. So for all the companies who are active in that field, they must invest a high amount of resources or get a high amount of resources to make or to develop this system further. Such an amount of resources, financial resources, investment, and so on, is something you can only get if you have a large narration around something. And this is, of course, something which these companies try to push. This is something why OpenAI published ChatGPT the way they did, to have this hype around it. And this is the point where I really think we should be cautious. First hand, are these really imaginaries of the future we would share? Is this something we would think that the systems might become? Or is this possibly pure fantasy to move into a particular kind of power position in the present? And I think these are the questions we have to ask when we're talking about such imaginaries when it comes to communicative AI. I hope you can link to that. If not, I'm happy to hear your disagreement.
Thank you a lot for your answer, Professor Hepp. And yeah, I will think about these three insights to think about the imaginaries about the future created by the AI systems. Thank you very much for your answers, and also to José Luis Fernández.
Okay, so now I'm going to open to anyone who's here at the meet. If you have any questions, you can just speak out loud. If not, I will give the word to Santiago, my co-host.
Well, maybe one thing from my side to start a conversation. So what I'm still thinking about is the understanding of micro, meso, and macro. I would say I have the feeling that the understanding of these terms, at least I would have, differ somehow. So my understanding of micro, meso, macro more comes from social sciences, and there typically one says, okay, the micro, is the level of the interaction between individuals. The meso, this is the organizational level, and the macro is the societal level. So when we are talking about norms within societies and things like that. And my feeling was that your understanding of micro, meso, macro was a bit different. And I would be interested in learning more about the understanding you have.
Yes, thank you for the comment. To me, micro, meso, and macro are relative levels. If I study, when you in Europe study, mention meso, macro, meso, micro, in education, micro is the ¿cómo se llama el aula? The room, ¿no? Micro is the school room. Meso is the programs to education. Y macro is the society organizing the knowledge on the society. If I study, for instance, musical industry, if I study the new phenomenon platform, the bad named urban music from hip hop, but very strong in only Latin America. I study, for instance, Visa Rap Sessions. I don't know if you know. It's a producer that make videos in YouTube with millions and millions of contacts, and he coming producing big success outside the majors, outside the big companies. So I understand through the micro to the meso that something is changing in the industry. And I make conclusion about the industrial companies of music still capture new phenomena and make money in Spotify too. Okay? Big companies negotiate with the musical platforms. But when you have a bizarre phenomena, he produced big success without the industry. Then the industry need to buy this phenomena to sell, to make their business. But I think somebody changed deeply in the ecosystem of musical industry. Before, big companies make a lot of money developing careers or new musicians. From the first records, the big success, the musician never make a lot of money. The company won a lot of money through the knowledge, the massive knowledge of the musician is arriving. This change now, musical companies if want to have big success, need to make a business with famous artists. The artists make money in a different way. I think that is a very important change in musical capitalism. If I no study the microphenomena, occurs is happening now. Big part of the musical industry think that urban music is not music. Industry is behind the process. I don't know if I am clear, but I think that the micro focus, the micro approach, show phenomena that from the macro for the micro is impossible to see. I don't know if I answer your question, Andreas.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, do you have any other interaction that you want, if you want to ask something to our
Can I say
guest?
something?
Yes.
Well, first of all, again, thank you both to stay here. I think that we have a lot of agreements and small differences that are important to talk about, because I think that there are the bridge to establish communication between our worlds. So in the first, I think that all we agree in that mediatization and datification are not opposite. All we agree in that this approach of AI and machine communication from the perspective of mediatization is the key to understand the process. I think that both are agree with this. But in terms of datification, I think the differences is how we think that data should be captured, or at least how we think that data capture should be discussed. No? I think that this is the socio-semiotical approach that can talk with the demediatization as a macro approach of the phenomena. I think that the idea, as José Luis say, that we can discuss the future of these processes using microanalysis. No, try to understand, as José Luis say, what is the small difference between, I think, we have in Argentina, or we have, if you look the catalog of Warner Brothers Music, you have Dua Lipa, which is a mainstream artist with millions of views, with millions of consumers, but in the same place in Warner Bros., you have Paulo Londra, which is a small urban singer from a small town in Argentina that has the same level of views. Or even you have phenomena that K-pop, that for instance in Chile, they sold 50,000 tickets in 8 hours, and Katy Perry couldn't say at least the half of the stadium. So you need the micro analysis to capture what happened here, and that I think that we can share a lot because we have a lot in common. Now, the idea of deep mediatization is, as a meta concept, a power tool to understand a macro level. I think that we need to talk more in how articulate that with the micro level. You, Professor Hepp, say that and we all agree because José Luis has written something about this, we cannot think in a business system, we cannot think in a banking system without thinking mediatization, because mediatization is a concept that goes through all the aspects of our lives. But at the same point, we think that we need to understand what is the difference between a home banking in blue versus a home banking in red, with buttons or with only links, no? We need to try to understand the meaning system working behind them. I don't know if you are agree. La cagué, dije una boludez.
Well, I'm happy to say something to what you said, but should I start or?
Yes, yes.
So the point I would make, or the argument we develop, and that's also a reason why we refer at this point to process sociology and relational sociology, is that we try to move beyond this micro, meso, macro distinction, because at least this was our argument so far. We did not consider it so helpful. So how does the argument of process sociology go, or figurational sociology? First of all, I think to understand this line of thought, it is important to have in mind that the distinction between individual and society is not made anymore. So in traditional or other parts of social sciences, more or less the individual is understood as a separate thing. And if different individuals act together, something like society would exist, and different kinds or different institutions of society would be grouped around the individual. Let's say the school, university, city administration, and whatever. And the crucial argument about process sociology or figurational sociology is to say that this is a misunderstanding how it goes. We only have, when we talk about social phenomena, somehow structured relations, and this is what is called figurations. These figurations also form what an individual is, on the one hand, and on the other hand, no figuration wouldn't exist if not different individuals would be part of it. So you cannot position the individual against society or society against individual. We as humans are society. And then the point is not a question of micro, meso, macro, but the point is more a question about the reach of particular figurations. So what is also called chains of action. So what is the possible reach of particular kinds of action or practice? It's a question on what Nick Couldry and I have then called figurations of figurations. So how smaller figurations somehow build larger figurations, which scale up to the point or up to what we call the state. Just to give you an example for why such a kind of thinking is helpful. An example for this is what Benedict Anderson has called the nation as an imagined community. He somehow makes the same point. He says, in a certain sense, the nation as a community does not exist at all. It only exists somehow in our imagination. So, as Elias would say, in the figurations of how we would interact or how we interact. And this is a different perspective than to say something like nation state, it's a macro phenomena. and something like individual projections is a micro phenomenon. The point here really is to say it's a kind of thinking, an attempt to think both always together. And then you end up in different lines of argument. So, for example, you always have figurations of groups in which you have, for example, decision making. But some figurations are considered as more powerful. So let's say a decision which is made in a particular kind of figuration which we call government. This has more or consequences, more far-reaching consequences than, let's say, a decision I make within my family. And this has nothing to do with the fact that these are different, how can I say, humans which fundamentally act differently together. It has something to do with societal discourses, with expectations against particular kinds of figurations in contrast to others, and so on and so on and so on. So this is how power relations within society work. I stop here now, but it was just for me an attempt or to try to explain that this kind of sociology, of relational process sociology, tries to take a different point of departure than, let's say, for example, methodological individualism or whatever, where we have this traditional understanding of micro, meso, macro.
Thank you. I think that we have more agreements that we think, but maybe a small terminological traduction. When you say figuration, you think in a kind of social articulation. When we use the word figuration, we became from literature with literature analysis. So figuration is the way that some things appears in some discursive materiality. So this is when you say figuration, don't say the same as we say using the same word. But I think that in the meaning, in the deep meaning of your perspective, I think that we are agreed because we think that individual is only a part of a social system. He doesn't exist, as you say, outside of the social system. That's the only thing that I want to say. But I think that we are more agreements that appears in the conversation. Agustina, tuyo.
Yes. Okay. So I kept thinking while hearing you about all of the aspects that we've been through in this like hour and a half that we've been speaking. And I was thinking about this, right? Language and how LLMs and everything that came 3 years ago with the launching of ChatGPT made us think in a different way, made us change our focus, our perspectives on how our society works around this. Integration is more and more increasingly getting agentic. So we have a lot of work ahead. We have a lot to think about. So this kind of encounters is very, very helpful for us in Latin America to exchange, to think, to rehearse different approaches to this. Not new, I wouldn't say new, but very fast forward technology advancement. So thank you very much, you both, for being here today with us for this almost 2 hours speaking together. It's wonderful. We look forward to more of these encounters. We're trying to build a strong network. So Andreas, we are very glad for your participation here. and look forward to continue with this bond. Thank you very much, José Luis, as well. And we hope to find more of these productions in the future coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, it was a pleasure.